Welcome to our podcast. This is Friends on Fire.
I'm Mike. I'm a lifelong devotee of financial independence. I even wrote a book about it.
And I'm Maggie, a newer convert, but just as passionate, especially on the intersection of minimalism and financial independence.
We're one and the same.
We are two like-minded friends who believe that talking about money with your friends and family opens the door to financial well-being.
The Friends on Fire podcast is about dispelling myths, building financial acumen, and sharing your financial independence journey with the people you care about.
This is Friends on Fire.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, Maggie.
How's it going?
It's going pretty well. We are full on holiday season, and as we discussed, the whole hygge atmosphere right now, I'm really digging it.
Is it alive in your house?
It's alive in our house. It's alive everywhere. I went out to a park by our office. Didn't go in the office, but I went by the park near it. And the whole park was decorated with Christmas lights.
Oh,
they're still doing that, even though there's nobody there.
Yesterday to pick up those chairs, and I didn't even, I went to the loading dock, so I didn't even actually go to the side where the lights would have been. And I had my kids with me, so I should have. So yeah, it's Thanksgiving week here, a few days before Thanksgiving. Yeah, we've put up our Christmas lights. We've, and then I just bought some new Christmas lights that I got to put out today. Man, every time I put out Christmas lights, I'm always surprised and disappointed at the ones that don't work from last year. Like, I'm like, what's going on? I change the fuses. I try to fix them, and then I just give up and get angry and throw them away. So this year I sprung for some LED lights, and I'm going to see if they last longer. They're twice the price. So
you remember how we were talking about how I bought a fairly nice Christmas tree with the lights built into it? Fairly nice by my standards. Working? Yeah, they're basically all not working anymore. So now I've just resorted to like buying extra chain lights or string lights and putting them around the tree. Looks fine. You can't tell.
So I'm excited for today's topic because it's been about a year in the making, right, Mike? Not because of you, of course.
Right. Definitely because of you.
So I think last December, as I can prove based on something funny that I was going to tell you, I think you suggested reading Tools of Titan. We had our goals of what we were going to read in 2020, and we were going to read more and, all that. And you suggested Tools of Titans, right?
Why don't you tell your version of the story and I will tell mine?
I can't remember. It was almost a year ago. Anyway, somehow we decided to read Tools of Titans. I got it from the library. I have been through this dance that's lasted a year with the public library, which involved me checking it out. It's a big book. I made some headway. I got like 60% through it back in January. And then I just got distracted. Who knows what, but it was just, I quit staying focused on that book and was like moving on to other books. And I slowly would have to I ran out of my renewals at the library. Then I had to check it out on my husband's card to keep it, which the librarian suggested. And then the quarantine happened, and I was like, oh, sweet. The library is like giving everybody a break on stuff, and they're shut down. So I had no pressure on me to finish it. So I just, let things slide. Next thing I know, the library is reopened post pandemic and quarantine, or not post, but they've figured out a way to reopen. They're kind of like not finding people, or I don't know what they're doing. They're being loose with stuff. But then the other day, they've been reopened for months in our area. This is a long story, I know.
Oh my God. Where is it going?
I finally get a letter from them. I'll put it up on social media because it's kind of funny. That's basically telling me, it's like charging me like $36 to replace the book because I've just gone MIA on this book, and it's a big book. And what's funny is the book costs $12 now to buy fully on Amazon. So it's not even an expensive book to own. But now I owe the library $36. I called them. I was like, I got the book. I'm bringing this guy back. He's very well seasoned. He's had a nice 2020 at my house. And I've now I finished the book. I returned the book. And we're finally doing an episode to talk about our money lessons and insights from Tim Ferriss's Tools of Titans.
I mean, that was a story full of context that presents yourself as the victim in this story. But let me tell you how this went down.
I think the public library, I think whoever else wanted to check out the book in my neighborhood is the victim.
So here's what happened. We decided to kick off one of our shared goals, which was to read a number of books, and we were going to pick books that we read together and discussed. You recommended Tools of Titans.
Oh, I did.
And then I was like, this is great. And I'm like, we just started the podcast. I'm dedicated. I'm just going to crush this super long book. I finished it on January 10th. And you were like, for months, like, oh, I'm almost there. I promise we're going to do it. It's now almost December.
It is.
And we are now doing this.
In fairness, it is November 24th. Because, my memory is not always the greatest. I thought we started reading it in like February or March or something. What's funny is last night I had taken pictures of some pages where it was like too much to take notes on. And so I just wanted to remember a certain phrase or something. And so last night I was in my Google Photos searching for the pictures. And I love Google Photos because you could just write book and it'll show me every picture I've taken of like a book page. And there's a picture of me reading the book on my lap. I'll post it on social media. It's me holding the book on my lap with a Friends on Fire mug and the Christmas tree is behind it. And it is dated December 26th. And I was on page like 350 at that point because you can see it. Anyways. It's just funny because I really was like, oh, I must have started reading it right before the pandemic. And then I got distracted and I was like, no, yeah. It's a big book. It's 647 pages, man.
Yes.
It's like 4 books.
I finished it right away.
I know,
and I've been waiting to do this episode literally all year, but I'm super excited we're going to finally do it.
Yeah.
I barely remember anything about it, but I'm glad you took good notes.
I took detailed notes because I always do. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, we're going to run through the book first off, just to clarify, even though it's 647 pages, it is the sort of book that if you didn't make a commitment to someone else that you're going to read it and then talk about it on a podcast, you could totally pick it up, read 10 sections of it, put it down, 3 months later, read another 10 sections. It's these short little chapters that are mostly the highlights of people that he's interviewed and met over the years. Tim Ferriss, the author. And they're all these like, some of them very famous people, some of them kind of obscure people, but that have like really interesting accomplishments or feats in life. And it could be like 5 or 6 pages or maybe up to like 10 or 20, I guess, on some that are just about his meeting of them, some of the things he learned from them, some quotes from them. And it's just these, kind of like short nuggets from each person. And then some of them are kind of summaries of things across a lot of people that Tim, like, he'll summarize all of his favorite books or I don't know, just a bunch of different things. So, I mean, I had, 10 plus pages of notes that I had taken as I read certain snippets and just things that I thought were really interesting. So I had 10 plus pages in notes that I had taken throughout. But what we really wanted to highlight today is some of the money related insights and points throughout the book and just talk through them a bit. Because I thought there were some really spot on and fascinating insights, things I already know and believe, and then some new things that, continued to grow, develop, challenge my thinking. And we're just, worth highlighting and a good discussion for this episode.
Yeah, let's do it.
So yeah, I know, dust off your memory, Mike. It's been a year for you, less for me.
Now I did, via Evernote, take a whole bunch of screenshots, which converts it into text, which is searchable. And then I have a folder in my Evernote account, which has all these kind of little nuggets that I've saved. So I did go and refresh my memory, but your notes
nice. I like it. I like that you're using Evernote. I got you onto scanning things and putting them in Evernote. Yeah, it's amazing. We should do an episode on it sometime, actually, because it's a good way to store all your financial stuff also. Yeah. Okay, so let's start with, we've just kind of chunked these into a bunch of points that we'll talk through. Let's start with the first one. So the first one is the idea of stuff and how it will not make you happy. And more broadly, just the concept of happiness and money. So this is something we've talked about before, right? We've got an episode, I can't remember which number, titled Happiness, Sex, and Money, where we talk about this. We talk about this throughout a lot of episodes. It is probably one of the biggest things, I think you would agree, Mike, one of the biggest mindset things that we both realized and achieved early on that has helped us on our financial journey. Would you agree with that? Definitely. So one of the first ones I love is Tim Ferriss. He has a lot of common questions he'll ask people. And so one thing that he frequently asks people is if they owned a billboard or if they had to write something on a billboard, for the whole world to see, what would it be? And that he's essentially asking them what's a quote you want to share with people, or what's a point that you want to reinforce to the world? He interviews Derek Sivers, who's the founder of CD Baby and just a fascinating person and I think serial entrepreneur. His billboard, he would write on it, It won't make you happy. And he would place it outside shopping malls and car dealerships. And I just loved that because it was a contextual reminder that, you know, all this spending of money you're doing is not going to make you happy. And then there's another point. One of my favorite chapters was Tim talking about his highlights of discussions with Naval Ravikant. I may be mispronouncing his name, so I apologize. Let's just call him Naval. And it just had so many fascinating insights to me. And I'm just going to read a quote from a few things that Naval said. The most important trick to be happy is to realize that happiness is a choice that you make and a skill that you develop. You choose to be happy and then you work at it. It's just like building muscles. I love that. So he then went on to say, in any situation in life, you only have 3 options. You always have 3 options. You can change it, you can accept it, or you can leave it. What is not a good option is to sit around wishing you could change it, but not changing it, wishing you could leave it, but not leaving it, and not accepting it. It's that struggle, that inversion, that is responsible for most of our misery. The phrase that I probably use the most myself and in my head is just one word: accept.
I really like this, and I think it kind of ties to the Derek Sivers quote as well, because I think a lot of people, they look at the micro decisions in their lives and choose to spend money to try to address them without looking at the macro issues in their lives. So they're unhappy in their jobs or in their relationships. And instead of trying to change their job, or accept and embrace their job, they just kind of continue doing what they're doing unhappily and then try to fill that void with a car or with some other very large, luxurious expenses or frequent expenses. And so I really like this because it addresses the larger issues of, you know, taking hold of your life. And I think that's what this book is also primarily about. They focus on so many different things about changing the way you live your life via these different tools of these titans and figuring out a way that you can make incremental improvements in all these aspects.
Yeah, which is, you know, I think everyone has different views on Tim Ferriss, but that is one thing that Tim Ferriss is amazing at, is bringing out these nuggets and insights from all of these fascinating people around the world and letting you decide, you know, which ones resonate with you and which ones, you know, you want to learn from and try. The quotes that I just read from Naval specifically, he wasn't talking about money specifically, but when I read that, I was thinking about money, right? And I was thinking about the idea of happiness and money. And I think that takes us to our next point, which is the role of money in your life. And again, this is so related to happiness, but the idea of enough, right? We talk about this a lot on our wants versus needs episode. This will be a Maggie stat because I don't actually have any of the stats or research to quote, but I know there's a ton of research around this, and it's super easy to find in Google. Not easy enough for me to have already done it, but it's out there if you'd like to look at it. But there's a lot of studies that show that over a certain income level, which is pretty basic, covers, you know, it probably would be like a lower middle class income level that covers your basic level of needs to be able to have a home, food, car, etc. That as you make more money, your happiness level does not increase. And often it does the opposite, right? So often people with massive amounts of money, their happiness starts to go down because there's all of these other distractions and expectations and things in their life that take away from their happiness level. So, you know, think like Uber celebrities and things like that. But it's just the idea of the role of money in your life. And, you know, it's there to serve a purpose. It's there to provide you certain things, but you only need enough of it to truly be happy. And I think people are often spending money in ways trying to chase something that they think is going to bring them happiness. And it's just putting them more in debt, more, you know, in servitude to other people, and just taking away their freedom, which we'll talk about more.
I think the stat you're looking for is $75,000 for a family income. And at this point, I don't remember if this was in the book or some other book that I read because it's been so long since I finished it. But essentially the point is that if you make $20,000, increasing your income to $70,000 to what, you know, scientists would say is this ideal level could double your happiness because you are now getting or increasing the basic necessities of your life. But if you make $1 million, increasing that your income from $1 million to $1,050,000 does nothing for you. And as you continue to go up in income, your happiness might decrease because it comes with all of these other issues. And so finding that level of enough is, the $75,000 number. And anything over that, it's not going to make you that much happier. It might make you a little happier, but it's probably not going to make you that much.
I found the actual study and stat because I thought it was funny that I'm just like, I remember something. You have a little bit more of the details and specificity on it. And then I was like, well, he's saying that. Let me just find it. It took 30 seconds to Google and find it. So it turns out we should just do more research, Mike. There was a 2018 study, so it's very recent from Purdue. And I'm sure there's been many studies before this, but this is a very recent one. So I think it's worth quoting. From Purdue University, it uses much wider data from a Gallup World Poll and found that the ideal income point for individuals is $95,000 for life satisfaction and $60,000 to $75,000 for emotional well-being. And look, we'll put a link to the article. You can read kind of what they mean by the difference between those two. But they actually showed that when people earn more than $105,000, their happiness levels decrease. And so this is our point of, there's this ideal income, and it doesn't mean you shouldn't make more than that, right? And
you shouldn't sacrifice too much to get more.
Yes. What you said.
Yeah. This is the worst book review ever, Maggie.
What do you mean? You're doing great. Okay. There's another, before we move on to the next point, another quote that I couldn't even tell you who said this. Back to your point that this is the worst book review ever. Somebody in the book, either Tim or somebody who interviewed. One of the nuggets I wrote down was, money is a great servant, but a terrible master. And that sums up the role of money and again, what it should do and the purpose it should play in your life and the idea of enough. And again, having the right mindset and role for money in your life, but not letting it rule you, right? And not becoming obsessed with constantly making more in order to spend more, to keep up appearances, to live a certain lifestyle that then is very stressful to maintain and uphold. And again, all of the stats we just referenced of, having enough and then taking the rest to save so that you have more freedom. And we'll talk about that more at the end, but it's a good segue into our third point,
which is knowing your target monthly income and your ideal lifestyle cost. This is one that I took a picture of because it really resonated with me. And it kind of relates to the idea of coast fire that our friends, the Pioneers, are advocates of. So the quote is, "What is my real target monthly income?" In other words, how much does my dream life, the stuff I'm deferring to quote unquote retirement, really cost if I just pay it on a monthly basis? And I thought this was really impactful because this is what people in the FIRE community are all about. Designing the life you want to live now and figuring out how much it costs. One of the big problems with standard retirement advice is that everything is presented to you as a percentage of your income. But financial advisors do not go into your expenses and tell you, you don't need 90% of your income. You need $50,000 a year to live the life you want. And that's what I believe Tim was talking about. I didn't take pictures of enough pages to remember who the author was. But
I think it was actually Tim talking about it.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, himself.
So this one I really liked because Maggie, you and I, we love tracking our expenses. We know what we need in order to live happy lives. And it's very little compared to a lot of people.
Yeah, well, mine's a little bit more than yours, to be clear, but yes, very little compared to a lot of people.
That's because you keep getting fined by the library.
Well, I negotiated my way out of that one, and I returned the book that I've been holding hostage all year. So I loved that Tim brought this up because we're even hearing this from someone who has millions. He could have billions. I don't know how much money Tim Ferris has, but he's got a lot of money. But I think he was actually even talking about an earlier point in his life. Mm-hmm. And the idea of, you said it in the quote, Mike, but, deferring stuff that you may be deferring until you retire. If some of that is travel, he started to look at what would it really cost him if he actually traveled now, which is one of the things that you just mentioned, Mike, the Pioneers, they talk about a lot, the idea of not limiting yourself so much today, a little bit of compromise, right? So you can live below your means and you can live reasonably, but not suffer, right? You don't need to not allow yourself to enjoy life because you're saving up for some date in the future. And I think that's an important point that just, I don't ever want to alienate people by thinking that we suffer in any way or by thinking that we're encouraging you to suffer and, save so much and get your target monthly income down so low that, you need very little to survive. Because I do love how the pioneers talk about, it's the journey itself is as important as the destination, and making sure that you find ways to enjoy the journey. And again, though, everything we just talked about up until now it doesn't cost a lot to enjoy the journey, though, right? It's little tweaks and little things and, budgeting for travel and, other, whatever your priorities might be, right? Which are different for everybody.
Yeah. And one of the ways you get your target monthly income down is by spending less. And there was some good little nuggets in the book about spending less. And one of the quotes that I really like was from Colin Powell. And he said, "Trying to get everyone to like you is a sign of mediocrity." I don't remember if he was talking about money, but it certainly applies to money.
I don't think he was, but I took it as a note about money because I like to take these quotes that people say, like, I think he was talking about like politics and like how you drive change and how you lead people and things like that, which is also a great quote for. But I think it's an amazing quote to be applied to financial things and lifestyle inflation and keeping up with the Joneses. And another quote that I don't know who said this, but I loved it, was, if you stop caring about what others think, you'll magically start spending less money, which you're really good at. Mike.
2003 Ford Explorer.
Yeah.
Case in point.
And we talked about this, I think, in the Once First Needs episodes, but there is a difference between what you think and what others think, right? Mm-hmm. So being able to separate, if something's really important to you and you can justify that, right? And I think our point here, even on sharing these couple quotes, was, understanding why you spend money, right? And if you can understand that and really get to the root of it, you will do better about what you do and don't spend money on.
The next point is something that we see a lot in corporate America, and it's about the chains that money puts on you.
So yeah, there is a whole chapter, and I can't remember who it was from in the book. But it's less smart. Important. Just read all 647 pages. You'll find it on your own. But he was giving all of these reminders to say, if you ever find yourself saying, but I'm making so much money about a job or a project, to really pay attention to that. And was challenging people to say, that is a warning sign that you're probably not on the right track. And this chapter spoke to me a lot because I've said that. I say that to myself a lot. I'll just put it at that, right? There's times where I am making, trade-offs in my life, and I'm thinking, well, I'm not able to spend as much time with my kids. Oh, but I'm making good money, and this is, the prime of me making good money in my life. And it's one of the reasons I've moved to a 4-day schedule, which we've talked about on the show. And it's a step in the right direction for me personally. But I thought the chapter on this really was a good warning of making sure that you're spending your time making money in the right way, in a way that is purpose driven for you and makes sense and makes you happy. And, I'm not saying everybody's going to love everything about their job. Sometimes a job is just to make money to support your family and everything else. But there's also a point where, there's different types of jobs that everybody could have that would afford them, different types of freedom in their lives, flexibility, whatever it might be that's important to you. And just a warning to not let, like Mike said, money put chains on you, and to be careful and cognizant and recognizing when that could be happening.
They're called the golden handcuffs for corporate employees. And this one really resonated with me because I see a lot of people who desperately want to go do something different, but they have some outstanding long-term compensation that is kind of hanging over their heads. And, and it could be $50,000 or $100,000. And I mean, that is a lot of money, but depending on how much you earn, you know, foregoing $50,000 in stock to go do something that makes you happy every single day of the year is kind of a no-brainer. And it's too bad that people sometimes will find themselves unable to make changes in their lives because of the promise of future income.
Yeah. On the flip side, I also will see people make changes for like literally $2,000 or $5,000 a year in salary that are taking them to a company that is less compassionate, less flexible, et cetera, and is a very short-term, short-sighted move. And so there's just so many things where, you know, you can't let money rule your life and be the center of every decision you make. And you said something a second ago about how much you're making, but so much of it is about how much you're spending too, right? So control the spending. Don't be as focused perhaps on how much you're making. And, you know, just be conscious of the trade-offs you're willing to make tied to how much money you're bringing in.
And one thing I recommend people do is if they are forced with a decision like that, where they need to go seek out more money or forego income, divide that over 365 days and see if that number is worth making a change. You know, Maggie, in your example of somebody might go find a new job for $2,000. If you're only talking about, you know, $1 an hour, which is, you know, 2,000 working hours in a year, $1 an hour to go do something that may or may not be good for you, that doesn't seem like a good decision. And so if you...
Yeah, I just took, that's a great tip. I just took that $5,000, divided it by 365 days. It is about $13.69 a day. After taxes, even less.
Yeah.
And does it feel, if you were to say, like, do I want to walk away from something that I know is good and I know, you know, people are nice to me, I'm respected, blah, 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 over to something that is unknown for $13 a day, I think I could just quit going to Starbucks and save $13 a day. That was not about me, but I'm just saying someone could say that to themselves. Okay. Our last point, which we're going to talk about for a bit here, because it is incredibly important, is there are so many references throughout the book to the idea of financial freedom, which is what we talk about a lot on this podcast. And speaking of, you know, us using the term chains earlier, Mike, there's a quote in the book, and someone else is making this quote, is sharing a quote from Thomas Huxley that is, "It is far better for a man to go wrong in freedom than to go right in chains." And I thought that quote, again, not necessarily intended initially around money, is incredibly applicable to money.
I really like this quote, and it certainly applies to a lot of the people who are in the financial independence space, because very rarely do you hear from people who have left their full-time jobs to pursue their passions regretted. Even if they make some mistakes and they find out they need to go earn some money somehow, it's never a decision they come to with regret. People feel good about it, and that's what I really like about this quote.
Yeah, I agree. So there is a whole chapter called, like we said, there's these kind of short little chapters. There's a whole chapter that's actually called How to Earn Your Freedom. I could reread this chapter a few times. I did last night, actually, because I had taken pictures of the, 7 or 8 pages in it. And a couple of quotes I'm just going to share. We're going to read a number of quotes from this chapter and just talk through them. In this chapter, Tim is talking about conversations with a few different people, and he's talking about, one of the conversations is about vagabonding and someone who wrote a book on vagabonding. But he's sharing this concept that, people often have this desire to travel and to kind of escape their day-to-day life and to get out and, travel the world and escape it all. And then he was saying, instead, our insane culture of fear, fashion, and monthly payments on things we don't really need, we quarantine our travels to short, frenzied bursts. In this way, as we throw our wealth at an abstract notion called lifestyle, travel becomes just another accessory, a smooth-edged, encapsulated experience that we purchase in the same way as buying clothing or furniture. And I just love this because, again, it's tied to a number of things we've talked about before and today around the idea of kind of just retiring early is not just to quit and do nothing and sit around, right? It's to spend time doing things you love and have more freedom. And I love the way he kind of turns around this point of saying, you know, instead of having that freedom, we cling to, you know, like, I love the phrase of like monthly payments on things we don't really even need. And then we take something that we say we want to do more of in travel in this case, and we, you know, do it once or twice a year for a week.
I like the way that he compares travel and vacation to the same way as you would buy clothing or furniture. That you are trying to purchase some experience versus just creating the life of experiences that you want. And I find that a lot of people do that, especially people who have very demanding jobs. They will do a high intensity 1 week trip somewhere that we all know that, like, for the first few days of vacation, you are not fully disconnected. And so if you're only going to be gone for 3 or 4 days, you are really never disconnected. You are overwhelmed by the amount of activity you're doing, and you're likely going to a place that you decided to go to, or a trip you purchased because you wanted to. You were approaching it like any other purchase. It seemed like a good idea. Other people are doing it. Maybe you wanted to impress other people with the destination you're going to, but it's not really addressing what it is that makes you happy and what you want to do with your time off.
Yeah, there's this whole trend of, I'm sure there's a lot of terms for it, but digital nomads and people who have decided, a lot of younger people and people of all ages too, who have decided they can work remote and still make a living, but do what they love doing all day long, which is traveling. And they're somewhere different every month, and they're, you know, slow traveling and living all over the world while they still make a living. And it's a great example of, you know, taking something that you strive to do someday in retirement. And it's one of the many things that, you know, getting to financial freedom can help you do more of. So the other thing that I loved as we're talking about vacations, Mike, is the guy he's talking to is talking about how there's this trend of vacations towards a more simple life. So people are looking for vacations that take them somewhere where there's not distractions, and where they like go to a monastery. There's a whole trend of vacations going to monasteries and things like that. And I love the quote of, you know, you're purchasing a package vacation to find a simpler life is kind of like using a mirror to see what you look like when you aren't looking in the mirror. And it's like you're having to purchase a vacation to go experience a simpler life. Like, you could actually create and have a simpler life in your real life if you like. And guess what? It will cost you way less money, which is something we often talk about. There are many things about our lives that are slower and simpler than the average American life.
I really like this one. And, you know, I see this all the time. And I also suffer from this as well, where I need to get away from my life. And I think I have a pretty simple life, but I find myself wanting to disconnect from it by going somewhere instead of just trying to disconnect from it. So there's a quote about John Muir, who founded the national parks. Great PBS documentary series about the national parks, Maggie, by the way.
Ooh,
it's like 12 hours long, though.
Can my kids watch it too?
Yeah, they probably would get bored. Who's the guy who does the super long traditional documentaries? Ken Burns documentary. So the quote was, "Freedom as John Muir knew it, with its wealth of time, its unregimented days, its latitude of choice, such freedom seems more rare, more difficult to attain, more remote with each new generation." And I think this is definitely true. People are finding it more and more difficult to have simple lives. And I think it comes a lot from the connection we have with technology, but also just the increase in consumerism in all categories of spending. There are just so many things in our lives which require attention that it is becoming more and more difficult to just go, in John Muir's case, go be outdoors and enjoy the simplicity of nature.
I was particularly impressed that these words were put down over 60 years ago. But the book was written in 1956. And I just think about, you know, the things and the trends they were talking about then. He actually quotes Thoreau a number of times in this chapter. And he's another example in his book, Walden, where so many years ago, you know, half a century ago, they're dealing with the same pressures and stresses that we are today, yet they're so different today in so many ways, but it's the same themes and trends. And even back then, there was this trend of people spending their money on things that didn't matter that they thought were going to make them happy, right? There was the same cycle. And I just think it's fascinating that this isn't like a new problem we're facing. This is something that's been around for a very long time. There is actually a quote that they give from Thoreau's book, that people spend the best part of one's life earning money in order to enjoy a questionable liberty during the least valuable part of it. The narrator's kind of going on to say, like, we'd love to drop all and explore the world outside, we tell ourselves, but the time never seems right. Thus, given an unlimited amount of choices, we make none. Settling into our lives, we get so obsessed with holding on to our domestic certainties that we forget why we desired them in the first place. That's a like drop the mic quote right there. Right? It's worth like, hit the back 15-second button and hear me read you that again. I'm not going to read it again. And it's just the fact that those words were said 50, 60 plus years ago, or in 2020, like 70 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. Is just fascinating to me because they're so applicable today.
One of the things that I think people get confused about with the whole FIRE movement and financial independence is about, like, what would I do with my life if I wasn't working? And I think most people will find themselves in a position where they don't know what they want to do. And so they therefore don't do anything. And I think one of the challenges,
or they just keep doing the same thing.
Or do the same thing. One of the challenges, but also the big opportunity in your life, is to spend your working years pursuing passions and activities and interests that create a lot of fulfillment for yourself. Figure out what you want to be doing with your life. Because if you have unlimited choices, you're unlikely to make any. But if you can start to narrow down those choices, you'll know what you want to pursue with your life. And it also gives your financial life purpose. And that's the big difference between people who are invested in FIRE and financial independence and those that are confused and turned off by it. I think people who are pursuing this aggressively know what they want to go do. And people who are turned off by it have not yet figured out what they're truly passionate about.
Yeah, or have not yet figured out what makes them happy. And kind of going back to what we started about, or going back to what we started on at the very beginning of this episode, the insight of really understanding what makes you happy and how throwing more money at tons of physical objects is not going to make you happy. And you can argue that that's just my opinion and not what is actually reality for you. But that is grounded in a lot of research around what makes many people happy, not just, me or Mike. And everybody has their different levels and kind of flavors of what makes them happy that could be very different than Mike and myself. But the point is, the average person is spending way more than they need to, has way more debt than they need to, and that they should. And it creates a lot of unhappiness to constantly feel like you're in debt to someone else, or not even feel, but to be in debt to someone else. And just this concept of financial freedom, Mike. And I love that you kind of gave a reminder of how it relates to FIRE, and often people getting very turned off by the idea of like, well, why would I retire now? And what would I do? And all of that, because the word in our show is, friends on fire, because that sounded cool. But what I really care about is financial freedom, right? I'm not worried about retiring early. Like that's not the end goal. It's, I want freedom, and I want to live my life in a way that provides me freedom to make the choices I want to make for the right reasons. And again, I love the many quotes in the chapter called How to Earn Your Freedom, because they're written, 70 plus years ago, and they're still so applicable today. The learnings and the insights and the trends that some people who were outsiders, right? Like the people that are being quoted here of like John Muir and Henry David Thoreau, they were different in their time, right? They were not the mainstream voice. They were, some people thought Thoreau was like crazy and, going off to like live at Walden's Pond and everything. And so I love things that aren't new concepts and that have been around for a long time and that we can learn from and see, like, this is a age-old issue that has been going on for a very long time. And it's not easy to fight it and, you know, take control of your life and not get sucked into all the crap that is around us, right? There are tons of companies that are trying to convince us we need something to be happy. That is their job. That is what they're trying to do. And it's hard to resist, right? And so I don't mean to imply that this is so like naturally easy. And this is the hardest time of year to resist it, right? Because it's the holidays and there's extra stuff being thrown at you and expectations out there in the world. So anyways, I think we should wrap up this discussion and share our top 3 takeaways.
Number 1, read inspiring books. And this is something that was really impactful for me this year because we set this goal. It forced me to read many more books than I otherwise would have. And I found a lot of inspiration and a lot of learning on a bunch of different topics.
Agreed. Number 2, it does not cost money to learn new things. So as we both talked about at the beginning of this, we both checked this book out from the library. It might cost you money if you don't return the book to the library.
If you keep the book for a year, it will cost you money.
The point is, it doesn't cost money. There's so many things available to you through, you know, free YouTube videos, through books at the library. There's so many ways to, whether you want audiobooks, Kindle books, all of them you can get free through your library. And there's just, it doesn't cost anything to learn new things. So don't think you need to spend a bunch of money to read inspiring books. I think that's an important point.
And number 3, and the really important takeaway for me about Tools of Titans is that there is no single path to success or to fulfillment, and that you should learn from other people, test out their methods for yourself, and then find something that resonates with you and stick with it. And that is the way that you make improvements in your life. So we definitely recommend Tools of Titans. It was a phenomenal book. You can take a lot of learnings about it and apply it to money, but I would say the majority of the book is not about money. It's about...
Oh, not at all, yeah.
Yeah, it's about mental well-being, healthy lifestyles, productivity. It is super fascinating. You hear the best pieces of information from a lot of very smart, successful, and interesting people. So definitely recommend it.
Yeah, and I thought a very cool variety of people, right? Mm-hmm. From super obscure people to like world-class athletes.
Yeah.
To entrepreneurs, just, you know, runs the gamut. And I think he even like gives you a reference at the beginning of like how to read the book. There might be a section where you're just like, I'm not really interested in this type of stuff. And so, you know, you can skip it and move to the next one.
Yeah. You'll still have hundreds of pages to read.
I know. Yeah. So don't be overwhelmed by the size of it. And we'll put a link to it in the show notes, but I'm pretty sure the actual hardcover book was like $13 on Amazon, like $12.98 when I looked the other day. Because I was considering buying. I don't like owning a lot of books lately, but I was considering buying it. So it only took us a year to start prepping for and finish this episode. I'm not sure if it was the quality of which someone would expect after an entire year of preparation. But that's okay. We'll wrap. I don't have a Mike's Minute on the mic today because I think we've gone a little long. So we'll. I got a quick Mike's Minute on the mic.
All right.
What book are you reading right now?
Shoot, Malcolm Gladwell.
Oh, Think or Blank or?
No, I haven't read those before. How to Talk to Strangers.
Oh, I've someone at work mentioned that recently.
It's excellent. I like all his books and his podcast.
I'm reading A Woman of No Importance, which you made a joke about once when you were trying to like make fun of me for something. When I don't remember what, and I thought you were serious, and so I put it on my hold list at the time.
It's an amazing book.
It's a great book. Yeah, it's a great book. It started out as a joke, but it's a great book. Okay, so thanks for listening, guys. If you have been challenged or inspired by what you've heard today, please rate and review the show. You can also subscribe to make sure that you never miss an episode.
And if you have any thoughts or questions, we'd love to hear from you. You can leave us a voicemail or text us at 404-981-3370 or hit us up on Instagram or Facebook.
Okay, enjoy your higgy, Mike. Higga? Higga.
Hugga.
Hugga.
Yes.
Enjoy your hugga.
Thank you. And thank you for finishing this book, Maggie. This was fun.
No problem. It was my biggest accomplishment of 2020.
All right. Thanks, Maggie.
Thanks, Mike. Bye.
Bye.